Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to have to do a little bit of a spontaneous reorganization here because the program is behind schedule. First thing I'd like to do is ask you or check with you. The session that I'm going to do is called How to Scale Your Business. If you're here for a different session, you're still welcome to stay. But that's what the session is, and I'm Dan Isenberg, because things are a little bit out of sync. Secondly, I'd like to invite those of you who are in the right place at the wrong time, if you'd like, please come forward, because we're going to try to have a little bit of a conversation. And the third thing I'll say is that I'm going to be brief. I'm going to truncate everything. You're going to have to bear with me, because I have a 1-hour slide deck. I'm going to flip through it and choose just a couple of slides and focus on those. The good news is you'll get to see all the slides. The bad news is that most of them will go flashing right by. But I'm going to be a little bit spontaneous. Maybe I should say a word about my background, again, for some of you, for the first time. I've been involved in entrepreneurship for 35 years. Roughly 35 years. I stopped counting at 35, let's put it that way. I've been an entrepreneur. I built and ran for 15 years a small global company from Israel. I was general partner of a venture capital fund. I'm an active angel investor. I've written about entrepreneurship in a book called Worthless, Impossible, and Stupid, which you've all read. And I've been involved in policy-related, let's call it social change in regions to try and foster more scale-up entrepreneurship. So I approached the topic of how you as entrepreneurs can scale up your business with maybe a 360-degree perspective. And despite that fact, it's dangerous, it's risky, not dangerous, it's risky to listen to experts stand up and tell you how to do it and give you advice or prescriptions on how to do it. Because it turns out that most or many of the ventures that ultimately ended up being successful looked to us, the experts, as ideas that were worthless, impossible, or stupid. And the entrepreneur made them work despite that. So that's what I call sometimes my first law of opportunity. My first law of opportunity is that every good opportunity has good detractors. They're really smart people who are telling you that what you're doing is the wrong thing to do. By the way, the corollary isn't necessarily true. It doesn't mean that if everyone telling you what you're doing is bad, that it's good. If everyone at a party says you're drunk, then the best thing is not to argue, just give the keys to somebody else to drive. So I will just skim very quickly. And this is kind of a play that has several acts. And it'll bring us out of our, I'm already skipping slides. So the first question is, what is this scale-up phenomenon that we're talking about that we're calling entrepreneurship? And I want to give this to you in the form of two people. One of whom you may have heard of, Dean Kamen. Dean Kamen developed quite a number of successful inventions, including a wheelchair that could climb stairs and a portable dialysis machine. And in 1999, buzz started filling Silicon Valley, mostly Silicon Valley, and John Deere said, oh, there's a new idea that's going to revolutionize human transport. And Stephen Jobs said, after he said a lot of bad things about it, he said he would invest. And they raised a huge amount of money. But within a few years, and of course you know what we're talking about Segway. Just a few years after these great investors invested their money and thought this would revolutionize everything about how we get from point A to point B, they hadn't heard of Uber yet, the word started coming out that this was actually a disaster. Now, I'm not judging the before or the after. These are just facts. But things did go downhill pretty fast from there. Dean Kamen was fired. They ran out of cash. A fellow named Jimmy Heselton bought the company. he ended up, this is not a joke, this is true, Jimmy Heselton, a well-known UK businessman, bought the company, ended up, he drove his Segway off a cliff and killed himself. A lot of things happened after that, but today Segway has virtually disappeared into airport security and tourism. And for sure, by the way, it was bought by a subsidiary of Xiaomi, the Chinese company, recently. So that's example number one. And now I'll give you example number two. You've heard of, many of you had heard of Dean Kamen. Except for listening to my presentation this morning, none of you had heard of someone named Robert Westman, who in 1999 didn't found a new company, but took over a company which ultimately became called Activus. And just in a nutshell, in 8 years, he grew Activus from, and when he bought into it, he didn't buy it when he bought into it, it was already 30 years old. Turned it from 90 employees in 8 years to 11,000. It went public, ACT. It just was acquired a few weeks ago by Merck for $35 billion. And you can read the numbers for yourself. And the question is, by the way, Robert Westman, in generic pharmaceuticals, everyone knows how to succeed in generic pharmaceuticals. The playbook is written. Everybody knows you have to be fast with a broad portfolio, you have to be inexpensive. So everyone knows the playbook. There's no innovation here whatsoever. And so the question is, which of these two men is the real entrepreneur? And I know that some of the real smart guys here in the room are saying both of them. But now I'm gonna not let you off the hook quite that easily, because it can't be both. Because they're diametrically opposed. Dean Kamen starts a company, innovates, invests his own wealth, accepts failure, misses the market, misses the vision, loses money. And Robert Westman, and of course executes poorly. And Robert Westman did exactly precisely the opposite. He bought in, didn't start up, he copied, he had little wealth, you didn't know that, I'm telling you, he was a middle-class guy. He absolutely abhors failure, achieved great market success, achieved his vision, made a lot of money, and executed perfectly. So I'm presenting this to you not because there's really a right answer, but to make you think. Now, if we had more time, we'd have a big debate, and you'd argue yes, and you'd argue no, and some of you would say that Robert Westman, he's just a really good businessman. But then the question is, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want entrepreneurship to be? Do you want it to be innovation with no ultimate success? Or do you want it to be success, which may or may not be innovative? So I'm going to skip this, sorry. This Tough Mudder, anybody heard of Tough Mudder? It's a mud race. The results, by the way, speak for themselves in 2015. They're just rolling in money. And nobody would invest in Tough Mudder. They started Tough Mudder with $20,000 in credit cards. Cinemex, a cinema, okay, excuse me, I'm going to go really fast through these. You heard the word disruptive today. So what is entrepreneurship if it's not all those things? And of course, we've had a proliferation. Allow me to skip through these. So it's what I call the E equals VC squared. It's first of all the creation of value for customers. We forget that the most important job of the entrepreneur is to infuse value into an asset and then recoup some of that value by selling it to somebody. The second is the capture of value. Even if we're creating value, we have to make sure that there's enough of it left for ourselves. It's called generating wealth. But you all know, and if you don't know, the Bessemer Venture Partner anti-portfolio tab on their website, it's classic. It's a list of all the deals that this top-tier venture fund missed. For example, Google and FedEx and eBay and Intuit, and the list goes on and on of the deals that they they refused. In fact, they turned down Fred Smith 10 times. So this is what I call the E equals VC cubed model. Entrepreneurship is value creation and capture, which is usually contrarian. It's age agnostic, etc. So we had an exercise, and this is actually my slide. Can you read that? These are just my own reflections on building a business. This is probably 25 investments, my own company, our venture capital fund, which by the way was a pretty, it's now on its 9th generation of funds, Jerusalem Venture Partners. So the first is that technology and innovation don't sell themselves. So what are the most important things that I tell my students who come to the Harvard Business School or Columbia Business School hoping to get that great idea? Is the great ideas never sell themselves. It's always difficult. Your great, whatever it is almost never greeted in the world by applause and standing ovations and cheers and balloons and fireworks. It's almost always greeted by skepticism. Even if you're someone who's an experienced entrepreneur. And the implication of that is that if you want, and this is again, I'm here standing up here prescribing after I told you that it's risky to listen to prescriptions. By the way, I still believe it's risky. You have to get good at selling. You have to get good at extracting money from people who don't want to give it to you. Generally speaking, every so often, like there's a red moon in the sky, people throw money at you, but almost always you have to develop the skills and the attitudes and the mindset to actually work with someone to understand what are the benefits that they want and how you can deliver those benefits. By the way, I know that's not rocket science. I know that you don't need to get a PhD from Harvard in order to know these things. But some of the simplest things, like learning how to sell and getting experience selling things. One of the best entrepreneurs I've seen, Abi Shah, has an enterprise software company called Clutch Group. Worked his way through college. He was an immigrant from India to the United States, a Gujarati Hindi. A Gujarati Hindi coming to the United States, who worked his way in summers at the University of Texas selling Bibles in the Deep South on consignment basis, making only commissions. He learned how to sell. The first year he didn't make money. He lost money. The second year he broke even. The third year he made money. The fourth year he made a lot of money just selling Bibles. You'd think that's a commodity, but you should hear him talk about Bibles. So sale is 80% of scale, not 20%. And I know that that sounds obvious to some of you, but a lot of entrepreneurs jump into the business of entrepreneurship and don't learn the profession of being a salesman, so getting that experience. This is what I call the first C. I look at entrepreneurship in very simple terms. The 3 C's: customers, capacity, and cash. The primary colors, the red, blue, and yellow of entrepreneurship. Customers, capacity, and cash. Getting customers, and I'll talk about capacity and cash just now. And when you sell, it's not enough to lose. You have to win. Not every time, but you have to get the order, and more than that, you have to get paid. You'd be amazed at how many entrepreneurs forget to actually get paid. So these are just a couple of other, again, we're going to end in just 5 minutes. I'm sorry about that. Maybe 6. To sell, it doesn't help to sell to other startups. Do you know why? Why doesn't it help to sell to other startups? They don't have any money. Babies don't partner with babies. Babies have to partner with adults, or at least older kids, Remember that. It doesn't mean that it's easy to partner with big companies because they have different mentalities and different decision cycles, but they're the ones with the cash. And in fact, there are quite a lot of companies that have been built around having one big customer to start with. Doesn't end there, to start with. Capacity. That's all about building the team. How difficult it is, and I know I had that problem myself, to recruit people who are better than you are at least one crucial skill. The problem is you don't know that. About a third to a half, rough rule of thumb, not Harvard science, about a third to a half of the hiring decisions that you make when you're building your company are mistakes. If it's not a half, it's a quarter. But a large number of hiring decisions you make are mistakes. And that means that one of the things that you have to learn how to do, so we have customers over here, and then we have capacity. It's building your team, building your people platform. You have to learn how to fix those mistakes really quickly. I've never met anybody who said, you know what, I parted with that person too soon. And I can't count on all of your fingers how many times I've heard, I wish I'd have done that sooner. And I've done it myself, and it is hard, but it has to be done. Many of the hiring decisions you make are going to be bad ones. The other thing that you hate to do, by the way, firing people is by far the most stressful, well, one of the most stressful things that business people, entrepreneurs have. But another very stressful one, or very unpleasant one, is actually creating those human resource policies that'll help you systematize not only the recruiting process, but the people management process. So I'm a big fan of bureaucracy from day one. How many of you know, have ever heard of the Epi Lady? How many of you know silk appeal, the thing that you use, you don't really have to answer this, but the thing that used to tear the hair off your legs and you pay a lot of money for, these little machines, that was invented in Israel. And the way it was invented was a spring that was used in a kibbutz to pluck chickens. And a kibbutz member said, you know what, I think I can use that for women to pluck their legs. Honest to God truth, Epi Lady. It had in the 80s, had meteoric success and then ran into huge problems when it got to about $100 million in revenues. And in came the former commander of the Air Force, Benny Peled. And Benny used to say, he defined himself not as an entrepreneur. I'm the person who comes in and cleans up the messes that the entrepreneurs leave behind. He came and turned around Epi Lady and made it a profitable company and then sold it. Entrepreneurs, when you don't systematize, you're embedding a defective DNA in your company. So again, in the interest of time, this last point is out of sequence, but I want to come back to it. Getting paid. One of the things that you have to have a system for is getting paid. You'd be amazed at how hard that is if you don't think about it. You need a system for getting paid and getting paid on time. If you could add up all the money collectively that people owe you and put it into a fund, and this is the Get Paid on Time fund, you wouldn't need, most of you, venture capital. You wouldn't need equity investors. You would have the best kind of financiers in the world. That's your customers who pay on time. So, now I'm talking a little bit about cash, and this will be the end. Eugene, blocking his last name, founder of Kleiner Perkins, Eugene, I think, Weiner, used to say that raising money is like being at a cocktail party. When they pass around the hors d'oeuvres, take one, whether you're hungry or not. Economic cycles are incredibly powerful at driving the supply of early stage capital. Exact same idea, exact same team, exact same market. When the economy goes down, is worth less. When the economy goes up, worth more. Means to raise money when you can and makes more. I've never encountered an entrepreneur who failed because of over-dilution. Do you know how many entrepreneurs I've met who have failed because they ran out of money? A lot. So I'll just end with the last point, which I think just goes with the territory. As a friend of mine said, who built a company based in Puerto Rico, entrepreneurship is tough, bloody shit, pardon my French. I'm quoting him. I never use those words. Entrepreneurship is tough, bloody shit. You work 7 hours a day. You don't see your family. You may not even be able to get a family. Work-life balance, it's perfectly balanced. It's all work and no life. And if you're not ready for that, and you're not ready for the near-death experiences, probably should think of a different profession. Scaling up is hard, bloody shit. And the only reason you do it is because you really, really want to. You think it's a really great idea. You think you're impacting the markets or society, and it's something that you have to do. So I'll end with that in deference to the next speaker. Maybe there's time just for one question if you have one. Is there anybody with a question or comment? Okay, shout it out, I'll repeat it. Go ahead, I'll repeat it.
So in your years of experience, what do you think is the single biggest mistake you make as an entrepreneur, especially when you're trying to scale up something?
So what is the biggest single mistake? Unfortunately, there's a long list of single biggest mistakes. But I'll tell you one that I think is generic. Because there's something about entrepreneurship, yes, it's part of human society, but there's a part of it that goes against human nature. And that's the ability to be convinced of a reality that doesn't exist yet on the one hand. Some people call it vision or passion. But you're able to vision something that doesn't exist on the one hand, but be completely hard-headed about where you are today. That's what I call the oil and the water of entrepreneurship. They don't mix. And the people who can do both, by being hard-headed, objective, and cool, at the same time that they're hot and passionate and excited about what they're doing, they're the people who can deal with the intrinsic tensions that exist in that hugely wound up spring that's called entrepreneurship. So with that, I really will end. Thank you very much. I'll be around tomorrow to talk to you if you want.